A few days before the whole situation in Venezuela developed, I did write down this article. This article essentially stated that Western forces don't have a serious issue fighting near-peer conflicts and that experience made during GWOT are more of a bonus than a negative thing. And while Venezuela isn't a real near-peer country, the actions taken by the Department of War and the US Armed Forces clearly show that Western militaries don't have an issue manhandling other militaries, either by conducting special operations, airstrikes, suppression of air defense, destruction of enemy air defense, and so on. Western doctrine has essentially been developed for near-peer conflicts / LSCO operations, and like everyone who served during the GWOT era probably knows that still most of the training we did back then was dedicated towards near-peer conflicts. Taking out enemy artillery, clearing trenches and the like, that all was part of the game, because even in Afghanistan, if you could clear an enemy trench, a well-defended trench system, you could clear an enemy wadi. What I want to go for is that Western doctrine indeed was developed for near-peer conflicts and is probably, despite all the voices screaming, oh, we need to change our doctrine, the best bet if it's executed in the proper way. The biggest backbone of Western doctrine isn't technology or certain assets. The biggest backbone is indeed experience. World War I, World War II, with especially the German military, but also the Western Allied military leading most offensive operations. In World War I, the Western world did witness that positional type attrition warfare using low quality troops is a disaster. World War I was a disaster for humanity. It was like a man-slaughtering machine. When things led up to World War II, tactics changed, doctrine changed drastically. Like, tactics got more dynamic, training got more dedicated, NCO training was more focused, and also Western society changed from Europe being reigned by monarchs towards more and more democratic structures. This is another big backbone of Western doctrine, being based on a free society. If we are looking at Eastern doctrine, Eastern Soviet society was a highly scientific, highly planned society. That's really reflected in the way they wage wars. They wage wars planned from the briefing room. Concepts like the idea of battle, like calculating the best place for artillery strikes, using like mathematic formulas. Everything is reigned from the top. On the other hand, Western armies work with a more horizontal type of leadership, where everyone involved and being a subject matter expert in a certain area or being on scene can provide input and is usually listened to. Very, very big thing for Western doctrine. If we are looking at Ukraine, like both sides, they come from a Soviet background. And if you hear their junior leaders complaining about one thing, it's exactly that. Like, they are getting rained from above, and there's a lot of planning going ahead with little to no information flow in between units. This type of mission command is what sets the West really apart. Training and technology. Again, World War I and World War II have proven that mass armies don't work. Mass definitely is an important thing, but the quality of the mass you project is very, very decisive. Tanks, like Western tanks for example, they are made to survive multiple battles. They are not made to be used in waves. Western infantry training is very sophisticated. On the other hand, Soviet doctrine says, hey, like the tactical level of combat, especially infantry combat, it's not that important. Like artillery at the operational level will fix that. Western forces having that training and technological overmatch, instead of projecting waves of just enough assets, quality assets are there to project shock and awe. And that's a really important thing you have to keep in mind. Like, quality is a center of Western doctrine. And that's why even in near-peer-like campaigns like the first Gulf War, Western forces could, due to that, even violate like the 3-to-1 ratio. Like, the attacking forces during Gulf War hadn't been there in a 3-to-1 ratio. They had been way less. Same for the 2003 Iraq invasion. Just because quality of training was so high, the technological assets fielded weren't just enough, they were light years ahead. And that's something people need to keep in mind when judging about Western doctrine. Western doctrine is not really embracing attrition warfare, because we have experienced attrition warfare multiple times in our own history, and it wasn't nice. Our population, furthermore, is educated enough to don't a set like senseless manslaughter. That's why we have been pulling out of so many counterinsurgency campaigns. Not because we lost due to military considerations, because the population wasn't willing to take it anymore. Of course, if there is a near-peer conflict in the future, whatever that peer looks like, because right now to the US armed forces and NATO, there is no peer. There's nothing that comes close to a real near peer. Like China is dangerous for sure, but it's not yet there. Like experience-wise, it's not yet there. Technology-wise, it's not yet there. Personal-wise, it's not yet there. So my pledge is, instead of reinventing the wheel and saying like, oh, we need to go for disposable assets, we need to go for mass conscription, stuff like that, just say no. Just say, we need to be good at what we always have been good at. Quality troops, professional armies, quality assets that are light years ahead of every technology that's out there and that is projected. That's it, guys. Thank you.